Hi, everybody. This is an kind of an out of the norm video for me. I am not a fan of stock picking, and what I'll be talking about today might sound like stock picking, but it's really not. It's more of an interesting situation that you might be interested in and a potential opportunity. It goes back to last year. I made a presentation at my one of my investment clubs, and it's about three companies that just have a really interesting story. And so rather than talk about it, let me just get into the presentation here and show you what I'm talking about. All right, so this is what I'm calling energy sector opportunity, energy sector buy and forget, maybe for 5 to 15 years. All right, so what are we talking about here? Uh, if you pay attention to what's going on in the world, you know that wind and solar are viewed as the green future of energy generation, electrical power generation. And that's generally widely thought and widely accepted, and more solar farms are going up and more windmill farms are going up. And historically or traditionally, nuclear power generation's been viewed as very expensive, and it has been. Multi-billion dollar plants, large cost overruns. The latest one in the United States was a $10 billion proposed plant by Santee Cooper. That ballooned to more than 20 billion before they canceled it because the price increases were just kept going up and up and up. So they just said, all right, that's cut the losses. Um, the other thing about nuclear power is it's generally viewed as dangerous. And if you think back to recent years, you had Fukushima in Japan a couple years ago with a tsunami. You had Chernobyl in Russia some years back, in Ukraine, technically. And then if you're old enough and remember, 3 Mile Island was big. So it's not been viewed as very safe. And there's this issue about the waste too, right? So you have nuclear rods in the reactors for some years and then they're done. But the problem is they remain radioactive for many, many years, even decades or centuries after that. Um, so it's not been viewed very, very highly. And if you're interested, just Google nuclear and radiation accidents and incidents. Those three right there are probably the three best known, but there's a whole lot more than that. And um, it's it's just an interesting Wikipedia page if you go find that. Now, there was a study done 10 years ago or so in 2014, and it forecast that if 100% of the power in 2014 were provided by nuclear power, that would have been the cause for about 12,000 deaths. And I don't know if that was an annual figure, but let's just say it was. So 12,000 deaths a year. Now, that sounds like a lot until you look at some of the competition. So when you look at the competition, nuclear is down there at the bottom, and then it goes up from gas all the way up to petrochemicals, gas, etc. So the top one there, brown coal, 5.2 million lives lost a year compared to 12,000. Well, that seems safer, even with the problems that we've had in a couple of those incidents. But things are changing. Well, things are changing for nuclear power. So what's changing? Well, it's getting safer. There's a new design called Small Modular Reactors, SMRs, and they're much safer. The kind of accidents that happened at 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl and Fukushima could not happen with these. The way they're designed and the way they're built, those kind of reactor uh, crises won't happen with these. It's getting cheaper too. In the past, the idea was build these big nuclear power plants, very expensive, have them run for many years and get the ROI off of them. But now, with these modular designs coming way down in size and cost, it's not nearly as expensive to generate nuclear power. And finally, there's now that we've had wind and solar power for some time, some things are coming to light. The unreliability. The Spain and Portugal just lost power for a day or two recently, and some of that was attributable to the solar powered orientation there. And I don't have all the details on that, but I was just reading some headlines about it. But forget that. Just when the wind is not blowing for the windmills and when the sun's not shining for the solar panels, you don't have power. We were in South Carolina last year for a backpacking trip and talked to a guy who was off the grid. He lived in the woods and had a house and had a couple of things on there, but he was not on the electrical grid, and he had a solar farm, and he said something to the effect of every good solar farm has a backup generator, which made us all laugh because you think solar farms that's what you need. You don't need a backup generator, but he was knowledgeable about that and said, no, you do need one for the days where it's not sunny. The other problem with wind and solar are waste. So they're not radioactive waste, but they are problems. Every solar panel will last somewhere between 20 and 30 years. So that's going to be a huge issue coming up in the next 10 to 20 years as the first ones start aging out and all the ones that are being put up now are going to be coming down. And then those huge windmills, those blades are composite material and very hard, if not impossible, to recycle. So those are starting to stack up where there have been wind farms for a number of years. So this small modular reactor in nuclear power is proving very interesting. And as best I can tell at the moment, there are 3 public companies that are investable by retail investors. There are a few SPACs, or maybe one SPAC, I don't know, that have some investments in a small modular reactor companies. But if you want a pure play, there's 3 companies. And here they are. The first one is NuScale Power. And its reactor is smaller. And the nice thing is it's a self-shutdown and self-cool. That basically means that somebody doesn't have to be there powering equipment and trying to cool the thing down, as is the case with typical nuclear reactors right now. It'll shut down and shut off by itself without having to worry about any kind of meltdown. And it uses a minimal amount of fuel, typically 5% of what the typical nuclear power plant of today uses. So very, very efficient. They're talking about putting these in coal-powered plants that are shutting down right now because there's a good amount of infrastructure there, and these modular reactors fit into those plants very nicely. The second company is Oklo. Oklo is the most interesting of these 3, primarily because they are able to take the waste, the nuclear rods, nuclear waste that are stored in all these facilities around the US right now. They're basically able to take that, recycle it in effect, take out 95% of the radioactivity, as well as a lot of the material. So when they're done, what's left is a much smaller sized amount of waste and a much less radioactive waste. They take the radioactivity out and use it for their reactors. And by their estimations, we've got about 100 years of fuel in just the waste piles around the US without having to dig up anymore. Again, this is one of the safer designs. It has a coolant shutoff. It has its own shutdown systems, even if those are removed. The reactor naturally stabilizes and shuts down without damage. So again, you're not facing a meltdown situation with these Oklo reactors. And it actually uses old technology that's been around since the 1960s, and it's just never been popularized commercially. But it works very well, and you don't have to worry about a meltdown. Okay, third company is the newest one, Nano Nuclear Energy. This company has created a microreactor with a ceramic core, so it almost atomizes the amount of nuclear material, and it puts it into a ceramic core. And then that ceramic core is what heats up and produces the energy in the reactor. The interesting thing is that the ceramic core dissipates all the heat just by sitting there. It doesn't require a cooling system. It doesn't require backup systems. Just if everybody were to just walk away, it would still be warm, but it would not ever get into a meltdown situation. So another fascinating one. Now, this company's only been around, I should say, it's only been public for, I think, less than a year or so, or about a year or so. All right, let's take a quick look at some price charts. They all look somewhat similar. This is SMR, kind of steady to down up until about a year or two ago. And then around the year end 2024, beginning of the year 2025, all of them had a big spike up. This AI was getting big. And the idea that we were going to need a lot of electricity to power all this AI, to help productivity, to do all the wonderful things that it can do. People were looking at these small modular reactors to help with that, rather than burning more oil or coal. Oklo's got a very similar. It was cruising along for a very long time, very steady, and then with AI, got very big and had a drop off in the January, February, March timeframe of 2025. And this is being recorded in May of 2025. So they're coming back. Same thing with NNE. Now, NNE, again, only went public around last year sometime. So it had the nice run up and then fall off, and then a slight recovery at this point. So are these good investments? Well, they've been, all three of them have been knocked down significantly. They're about half of the peak, half price of the peak where they were back at the end of the year, beginning of this year, in part because of DeepSeek, and in part because of all the tariff conversations going on right now. Now, the DeepSeek is actually can be viewed as a positive factor because of Jevons paradox. Jevons paradox relates to technology, and if the price decreases for technology, then the idea is that it's actually not, people are not going to require less of it, but they're going to want more of it. So it's a little bit of a paradox, and the price goes down and then the demand actually goes up. So the fact that DeepSeek is bringing down the price of AI is not a bad thing for electrical generator companies and technology. It's actually a good thing. It's going to increase the amount, according to Jevons paradox. Now, another positive factor, much improved safety for these new small modular reactors and much lower cost. There's no CO2 emissions, effectively zero. There is in the production of the plant and operations of it, there is a very, very small amount, but nothing in comparison to oil-powered, coal-powered plants. So is this a buy and hold kind of investment? Again, I'm generally not a fan of buy and hold, but might this be an investment that you buy and hold and forget about for 5 to 20 years? It's possible to think of these as small companies that are one or more of them is going to do really, really well in the long run. And maybe a couple of them will do really, really well in the long run. Not sure. We'll have to wait and see. Now, I can't make a representation about whether this is a good investment for you or not, because I'm not a licensed financial advisor. If I was, I'd still have to talk to you to see if it makes sense to this. But what I can recommend is that you do your own research, look into these companies, look into the technology, look at nuclear power and the renaissance going on around it now. And I can recommend that you check with your investment professional to see if an investment in one or two or three of these might make sense. Okay. That's it. I hope you found it a little bit interesting as well. And I may or may not be invested in any one of these companies at the time you see this. I can't say at the moment, but I think it's an interesting opportunity, and I will definitely be watching the space. All right. Thank you very much. And let me finish up with disclaimer pages.